Let's be honest, if you are watching this right now, there is already a woman in your mind you cannot fully read, and that uncertainty, it is not random. It is designed by behavior you have not been trained to decode, because attraction in women is rarely loud in the way men expect it to be. It hides in timing, in hesitation, in contradiction, and most men miss it completely. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you something most people never notice. Not because it is hidden from you on purpose, but because no one taught you where to look. A woman can feel deeply drawn to you and still act like nothing is happening. That tension is where the truth lives. Pay attention to this first sign. She stays near you without a clear reason. Not always physically close in an obvious way, but she creates patterns that bring her into your space. She replies when she does not need to. She shows up in conversations that are not necessary. There is no direct confession, but there is repetition, and repetition is never accidental when emotion is not involved. Now, here is where most men misinterpret everything. They look for words, they wait for her to say something direct. But attraction does not always start in language. It starts in behavior she cannot fully control yet. The mind may deny, but actions reveal pressure building underneath. Another thing you must notice is contrast. One moment she is warm, engaged, even playful. The next moment she becomes slightly distant, almost cautious. This is not confusion without meaning. It is internal conflict, a push and pull between what she feels and what she is willing to show. And here is what makes it even more important. She will rarely explain the shift. She will not say, "I am interested, but I am holding back." Instead, she will adjust her behavior subtly. Shorter replies at times, longer attention at others. Small signals that create emotional uncertainty in you as well. That uncertainty is the trap most men fall into. They think inconsistency means lack of interest, but in many real situations, inconsistency is emotional control. It is her way of managing intensity she is not ready to admit. You do not respond to this by chasing harder. You respond because the real pattern always repeats itself, if you are patient enough to see it. There is another layer most men miss completely. When a woman is deeply attracted but silent about it, she becomes more aware of you, not less. She notices details she would normally ignore: your tone, your timing, even your absence. And she reacts to those changes in ways she does not openly acknowledge. If you have ever felt like someone is paying attention to you without showing it directly, you are not imagining it. But you are also not supposed to rush to conclusions. What matters is consistency over emotion. Not one moment, not one conversation, but the pattern that keeps returning even when nothing is being said. And once you see that pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it. It changes how you read people forever and forces you to see what was always there beneath the surface without words or confirmation. When you start noticing her behavior more closely, something strange begins to happen inside your mind. You stop focusing on what she says and start feeling the weight of what she does not say. That shift is where most men either become more aware or completely misread everything and lose control of their emotions. There is a second sign that is even more revealing than proximity. It is a tension that feels unintentional. She notices you too quickly, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in small reactions that happen before she has time to filter them. You walk into a space, and her expression changes for half a second. You speak in a group, and her focus returns to you even when she is pretending to listen elsewhere. These micro reactions are not planned. They happen before logic steps in. And here is what makes it important. A woman who feels nothing does not react like that. Neutral energy stays neutral, but emotional attraction creates interruptions in her normal behavior. She may not even realize she is doing it, but her attention keeps returning to you like a reflex. Now listen carefully, because this is where most men misinterpret everything again. They see attention and assume confirmation, but attention is not the same as expression. She can be fully aware of you without being ready to show it openly. That gap between awareness and expression is where silent attraction exists. Another layer of this sign is delay. She does not always respond instantly, but when she does, the response carries emotional texture. Sometimes it is playful, sometimes unexpectedly thoughtful. The inconsistency is not random, it is emotional regulation. She is managing how much of herself she allows into the interaction. And there is something even deeper happening underneath. She starts to test your stability without making it obvious. Not in a manipulative sense, but in a subconscious way. She observes how you respond when she is warm and how you respond when she pulls back. Most men panic during the pullback. They overcompensate. They chase clarity. And that is exactly where attraction collapses because attraction does not grow in pressure, it grows in emotional balance. If she is deeply drawn to you but silent about it, she will often create space and then return to see if your energy remains steady. Not because she wants control, but because emotional consistency feels safe to someone who is uncertain about their own feelings. And here is the truth. Most people never explain clearly. When attraction is real but unspoken, it does not move in a straight line. It moves in waves, approaching, retreating, observing, returning. Your role is not to force meaning out of every wave. Your role is to recognize the pattern of return because anyone can act interested once, but only genuine pull creates repetition over time without explanation. And if you are paying attention, you will start to notice something important. You are no longer guessing based on moments. You are reading behavior across time. That is the difference between confusion and understanding. And once you reach that level of awareness, you stop reacting emotionally to every shift and start seeing the real structure underneath what looks like inconsistency. At this point, most men start making a dangerous mistake. They begin to think attraction is something they must prove or earn through effort. But real attraction does not respond to effort the way people assume. It responds to presence, consistency, and emotional impact. And this is where the third sign becomes impossible to ignore if you are paying attention. She remembers details you never expected her to remember, not just big things, small things, offhand comments you made weeks ago, a preference you casually mentioned, a passing opinion you didn't even think was important. Now ask yourself something honestly. Why would someone store information about you that doesn't benefit them socially or practically? The answer is simple. Emotional attention creates memory retention. When someone is emotionally engaged, even slightly, their brain prioritizes information connected to that person. But here is the twist most men miss. She does not always act on what she remembers. She simply keeps it. And that creates a silent tension, because you begin to notice she knows more about you than she openly shows. She references things casually. She aligns with your preferences in subtle ways. Not to impress you directly, but because you are already in her internal awareness system. Now, this is where things get psychologically deeper. When attraction is unspoken, memory becomes a substitute for expression. Instead of saying how she feels, she builds familiarity through recall. It is safer, it is controlled, and it allows her to stay emotionally engaged without exposing vulnerability. But there is another layer to this sign. She pays attention to your emotional shifts, not just what you say, but how you feel when you say it. If your tone changes, she notices. If your energy drops, she senses it. If you become more confident, she reacts to that too. This is not conscious analysis. It is emotional calibration. And here is what most men completely overlook. She does not treat everyone with this level of emotional tracking. Neutral interest does not produce memory depth. Indifference does not produce emotional sensitivity, but attraction does. Now, you might think this is a green light, but it is not that simple because remembering you does not automatically mean she is ready to express anything. Instead, it means you are occupying mental space without permission being fully granted emotionally. And that creates hesitation inside her because the more she notices you, the more she has to manage what that means. This is why you will sometimes see contradiction. She remembers you clearly, but still acts uncertain. She engages but does not fully commit emotionally in behavior. She is processing internally while maintaining external control. And if you are aware, you stop interpreting this as confusion and start seeing it for what it really is, a mind that is already engaged but not yet expressed. The real mistake men make here is rushing to fill that silence with action. But silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is processing time. And if you interrupt that process with pressure, you break something that was naturally forming on its own. There is a point in every slow building attraction where behavior starts to shift in a way that feels almost invisible at first. But once you notice it, you cannot unsee it again. And this is the fourth sign. She becomes slightly more emotionally available in moments where she feels safe and slightly more guarded when she feels exposed. That sounds simple, but the psychology behind it is not. When a woman is deeply attracted but not expressing it directly, her emotional system begins to split into two modes. One part of her wants connection, the other part is protecting control, and those two systems do not move at the same speed. So what you get is variation in emotional openness. You might notice she shares more personal thoughts with you than with others. Not everything, but enough to feel like there is trust building. She may talk about her day differently with you. She may express opinions more freely, even small vulnerabilities that do not appear in her general social behavior. But then something changes. The moment the emotional depth feels too direct, she pulls back slightly. Not completely, just enough to regain control. This is not rejection, it is regulation. And here is where most men misunderstand the entire situation. They interpret the pullback as loss of interest, when in reality, it is emotional overload management, because attraction is not just excitement, it is also vulnerability. And vulnerability creates internal pressure when it is not fully accepted yet. Now, there is another subtle behavior that comes with this sign. She mirrors you. Your phrases start appearing in her speech. Your humor style shows up in her responses. Even your pacing in conversation starts to influence hers. This is not imitation for attention. This is subconscious alignment. People only mirror those they are emotionally tuned to. It is the brain's way of building familiarity and reducing psychological distance. But here's the part most men never consider. Mirroring does not mean readiness. It means resonance. She feels something aligning with you internally, but she has not decided what to do with that alignment yet. And that is where silence becomes powerful, because she is now observing not just you, but herself in relation to you. Another layer of this sign is hesitation in ending interactions. Conversations do not end abruptly. There is a soft extension, a final comment that leads to another topic, a delay before goodbye, a subtle reluctance to disconnect too quickly. That is not politeness. That is emotional resistance to separation. But again, do not misread this as certainty, because attraction that is not fully formed often exists in contradiction. She wants closeness, but controls distance at the same time. And this internal push and pull is what creates the slow emotional buildup that most men either rush or ruin by misreading. If you understand this correctly, you stop reacting to individual moments and start observing emotional rhythm, because the truth is simple. People do not reveal attraction in one gesture. They reveal it in patterns they cannot fully control over time. At this stage, something becomes very noticeable if you are paying attention with emotional discipline instead of desire. Her behavior starts to orbit you in small but consistent ways, not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. And this is the fifth sign. She finds reasons to re-enter your awareness. It may look completely casual on the surface, a message that does not need to be sent, a reaction to something you posted that she could have ignored, a question that already has an answer elsewhere, or a presence in your digital space that feels slightly too frequent to be coincidence. But the key is not the individual action, it is the pattern of return. People do not repeatedly re engage with something they are indifferent to unless there is emotional or psychological pull involved. Now, here is where most men make another mistake. They assume re engagement equals commitment. It does not. It means access is being tested. She is not declaring attraction. She is testing emotional safety inside the interaction. Every re entry is a small evaluation. Does this feel stable? Does this feel safe? Does my presence here feel welcome or uncertain? And without saying a word, she is building internal data about you. There is another subtle layer to this sign. She reacts differently to your attention than to others. When you give attention, even in a normal way, her response carries more awareness. Not excitement that is obvious, but awareness that is sharpened. She becomes slightly more careful in tone, slightly more intentional in wording, and slightly more observant of how you respond back. This is emotional self-monitoring triggered by interest. And here is the part most men completely overlook. She does not behave like this with everyone. Neutral interactions do not create self-awareness, but emotional relevance does. Now something even more subtle begins to happen. She starts remembering your absence, not just your presence. If you are not around for a period of time, she notices the gap in a way she does not articulate. And when you return, there is a quiet recalibration in how she engages. Slightly more attention, slightly more warmth, slightly more curiosity than before. This is not dependency, it is emotional imprinting. Your absence creates contrast, and contrast strengthens awareness. But here is the critical misunderstanding men fall into again. They think increased engagement after absence means missed you in a simple sense. But psychologically, it often means she is measuring emotional continuity. She is checking whether the connection feels consistent or unstable over time. And stability is what attraction quietly depends on. Another layer appears here too. She becomes more responsive when you are less emotionally reactive. When you stop over-explaining, when you stop chasing clarity, when you stay steady in your energy, her engagement often increases. Not because she is being manipulated, but because emotional stability reduces internal resistance. And when resistance drops, interest becomes easier to express indirectly. So, what looks like mixed signals is often just timing mismatch between internal attraction and external expression. And if you can see that clearly, you stop chasing moments and start understanding momentum. If you have followed the pattern carefully, you should already understand something most men never fully grasp. Attraction that is not spoken still behaves like attraction. It follows structure, it follows rhythm, it follows emotional logic even when words are absent. And this final sign brings everything together. She becomes emotionally inconsistent only around you, not in general life. That distinction is critical because a woman who is simply confused is inconsistent everywhere. But a woman who is emotionally affected by you shows inconsistency specifically in your presence or in your interaction pattern. One moment she is engaged, even warm. The next slightly distant or overly composed. Not because she is playing games, but because your presence activates emotional processing she does not fully control yet. And here is what is really happening underneath. She is balancing three internal forces at the same time: interest, caution, and self-image. Interest pulls her towards you. Caution slows her down. And self-image tries to keep everything controlled so she does not appear vulnerable or exposed. That internal conflict is what creates the signals you have been seeing throughout all of this. Now listen carefully because this is where most men completely misread reality. They think the goal is to get her to admit it, but admission is not the goal. Understanding is because if you understand the pattern, you no longer need forced confirmation from words that may never come. You start reading consistency instead of chasing confession. And here is the final truth. A woman who is deeply attracted but silent will not always make it easy for you to decode her, not because she is hiding from you specifically, but because she is also processing her own emotions in real time. So, what should you actually do with this knowledge? You do not chase harder. You do not withdraw to test her. You do not force outcomes. You observe stability. You stay grounded. You allow behavior to reveal itself over time instead of reacting emotionally to every shift. Because the real difference between confusion and clarity is not intensity, it is patience combined with awareness. And now I want you to reflect on something important. If a woman shows you attention, remembers you, adjusts her behavior around you, and returns to your space repeatedly, but never says anything directly, what do you think that pattern is actually telling you about emotional reality versus spoken reality? Write your answer in the comments. And if this helped you see things differently, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who is still misreading silence as disinterest. Because sometimes the truth is not hidden, it is just unspoken.